Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome back to the Big Life Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Neal Oates Jr., Robin Lewis. We are going to have a lot of fun today. Mr. Robin Lewis, how are you doing today, sir?
Hello, Neal. I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to dive into today's topic. This one really resonates with me. I shared with our listeners some time ago that this is one of those areas that if looking back, I think I could have been more consistent. And so today we're going to be talking about consistency, how those small daily actions lead to big life-changing transformation. So a lot of times I want to take the big step and get it all done, when the reality is that it's taking a little step every day that actually leads to the huge results.
And so
I'm excited
Robin,
to jump into this today, sir.
So you talk about you. I know I'm guilty of this as well, right? Not wanting to do the mundane small things, wanting to see those huge successes. And so when we hear consistency, some of us get excited, some of us shrink down and say, this again, right? Because we often hear, or we feel that we hear those things that we need to hear that strike our hearts, right? That might be convicting to some of us. And so here's what happens oftentimes. We look at successful people, Robin, and we think, how did they get there so fast, so quickly? Then you and I, we have to do a little bit of excavation. And when we dig deeper, we realize that they didn't get there quickly. It's the daily consistent actions that got them there. It wasn't this huge quantum leap. And this is going to be true whether it's in business, health. Now, let's not even talk about health, right? Because I want to do 2 days of exercise and see a six-pack. In our relationships, personal growth, fortunately and unfortunately, consistency really is the key. And so today we're going to explore just how powerful it is. And so for me, this is the good, the bad, the ugly. It's going to be a time when I can say, yay, I'm consistent in these areas. But then also for me, I'm going to have to hold that mirror up to myself and say, I'm not doing so great in others. Anything before we begin, Robin?
No, sir, I agree. I think it's a hot topic. And I think if our listeners can get a hold of this, this will make a big difference in their lives.
So let's start by asking this question. What is consistency, right? So if we break it down, we need to know, what do we mean when we're talking about consistency here on the Big Life Podcast? A lot of times people think it's about being perfect. And if consistency were perfection, Robin, I can only speak for Neal, I would be out of the game. So they think it's about being perfect or doing something huge every day. But it's really about showing up consistently, no matter how small the action might seem. And so I want to know, well, for me, that's a relief, right? When I know I don't have to do something huge or do something big every day. But I want to know, Robin, how would you define consistency?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said, but I think it's a matter of doing something every day. So recognizing that it's just a little bit. We don't have to, I think of I forget what the 5 daily habits that John Maxwell teaches on, right? It's about doing 5 things consistently every day. And he gives the example of trying to cut down a tree. And if we go out and we swing just a few times every day, day after day after day, then will eventually cut that tree down. Consistency is a major part of that. It's about going out every day and doing some cutting. It's not about perfection. It's not about trying to get it all done in one day. It's really about finding the things that will help you to move forward to the things that you are trying to achieve, and then doing that every day. So it's creating habits. It's coming back the next day. It's doing the same things over and over, over and over. That's
And so,
consistency.
Robin, that four-letter word habits, right? So many of us, we think of habits and we think of our bad habits, but you're talking about building, because many of us are being consistent right now. We're just being consistent in the wrong areas of our life. And so, as you mentioned, just a little activity every day. I love that. And so so here's what I like. It's like setting an intention to make progress every day, no matter how small. And if I am being honest with you, Robin, and with our audience, I know that my ambition will cause me to discount those small activities, right? But it's those small activities that we do daily that are going to build the momentum. And so I think of this quote by Aristotle: we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And so this goes back to what you just mentioned, building those habits. And this quote highlights how consistency shapes everything we are and everything we achieve.
Yes, it's so true. And by the way, I just want to pause for our detailed listeners today. You said habit is being a four-letter word. I know, so I just want to help them out, because somebody is stopping and they're saying, Neal, there's 5 letters in habit, Neal. And he was just saying that figuratively, meaning that, the 4-letter words that we don't like to hear sometimes.
Bad
But
words, those naughty words that we're not supposed
exactly,
to say. So
exactly.
real quick on that, Robin. So you talk about, so there are a few four-letter words in Neal's vocabulary, right? Like habit is one, discipline is another. The word no, we consider a four-letter word because we don't like to be told no. And then in my world, average is a four-letter word because that's one of those no words that we don't say. We don't want to be average. We were created to be exceptional masterpieces. So thank you, Robin, for clarifying that it's not the number of letters in the word, it is the meaning behind it. And so, Robin, this is where you remind me that how important communication and clarity are, right? So as we talk about consistency, right, I know that one of the things that I have been consistent in is the circles and the environments that I'm in. And so we have a specific way that we speak. So I'm consistently exposed to individuals. So our vocabulary and vernacular are going to be the same. And guess what? Because of my habits and my consistency, I took some things for granted and I made an assumption that our audience would know exactly what I was talking about. But thank you for clarifying, Robin.
Well, they probably did, but sometimes there are people. I'm sure they did, Neal. But I just make it fun because I'm
We
sure
never know.
there's also that person that is that detailed person who we love, and that they were counting it. Well, that's not a 4-letter word, Neal. Come on.
And all of a sudden they're saying, if this guy can't count to 5, then we
Yeah.
definitely do not need to listen to this podcast anymore. We're out of here.
All right. So we can have some fun here too, can't we? But Neal, I
Absolutely.
love what you're saying, and it's I just reiterate, so it's about, when we talk about consistency here, what happens is we're creating habits. So we're doing something repetitive until it gets to a place where we no longer have to force it. It's like brushing our teeth, right? We can brush our teeth now. We brush our teeth now. We put on our socks. We put on our shoes. We comb our hair. We shave our faces if we're men. We put on the makeup if we're women, and so on. The point is that we do things now without having to force it. And that's what consistency can actually create for us.
And then, Robin, what I love about the consistency and the habit is that it becomes a part of who I am. Right now, I don't have to spend or waste that time trying to force myself to do this thing, but because it has become habitual,
Yes.
I get to reap the benefits of that. Then, and so really quickly, Robin, when we talk about consistency and whether it's in action or in being and being having consistent character, I want to pause here and just talk about consistency of character for a moment, because when I mention it becomes part of my identity and who I am, like me brushing my teeth or the way I dress or how I conduct myself. Would you just talk about the consistency of character and how now, when you're consistent and you show up the same way and you have these habits of excellence and respect and care and trying to uplift and equip others, just talk about how that shows up, because we're going to talk about the compound effect and maybe in business and relationships, but that habit and consistency as a person and in character, talk about what that does just for yourself, but then also for those that you come in contact with on a daily basis.
Yes, sir. It's so important, actually. And so, as we talk about consistency, that's one of the areas that we can try to be consistent in. And that's a journey. First of all, it doesn't happen, in one day. That's definitely a good example to look on, and then we can look back at it. I think what it does, Neil, is it builds trust. I think that's the most important part of having a consistent character is people can know that they can rely on you. No matter what the circumstances might be, they know how you're going to respond. They know how you're going to act. They know how you're going to treat them. They know how you treat people. They know your level of integrity and so on. They know your attitude and whether it's consistently on a positive basis or on a negative basis. And so as they get to know you in that way, they can develop trust. And as people develop trust, then that means your influence with them goes up also, your leadership. So now you have people that are there to support you because they know you. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it goes such a long way, a consistent character. That's one of the areas that you and I continue to try and work on because I know it's not what I want, it's who I am. So
Yeah.
that how I show up really is what creates the results that I experience in my life. Such a big deal.
Absolutely. So now we're going to go from consistency. We're going to talk about something really powerful, and that is the compound effect. We hear about the compound effect, and I'm sure the example that many of us have heard before is: would you take X amount of money or 1 penny that compounds every day, that doubles every day for 30 or 31 days? And so the compound effect, this is one of the reasons why consistency works. The compound effect is essentially the principle that small, like little, seemingly insignificant actions that they accumulate over time. And as a result, we look up and we have this massive transformation. Think of it like the compound interest in a bank account, Robin. And so this is where I know that for me, I have seen the compound effect when it comes to my health. Me not drinking dark soda, right? That was the only thing I took out of my diet, not drinking dark soda. And as a result of me not drinking soda, day after day after day, I started getting in better shape. And then I started feeling better, started looking better, started wanting to walk. And then I changed other dietary decisions that I made. So I'm curious, Robin, when it comes to the compound effect, what actions have you seen in your life where the compound effect took place?
Yeah, oh man, definitely. Certainly as a business owner, I didn't show up knowing all that needed to be done and I didn't have it all figured out. But then I started doing things that over time helped me to serve better. Like I think about my customers, understanding people, understanding what they need. And so that was a growing process for me. And as I started to develop the habit of listening, for example, the habit of helping to look for the need that they had so that I could then properly serve them, seeking first to understand before I try to show them what I can do for them. Things like that, as I started to do that more and more and more and more, I grew. It's something we just talked about last week is developing people, the idea of investing in people. I started to do that. And the more that I did that is the better that I became at it, right? I got better at doing it, and then it helped me to have better people around me, and the organization got better as a result. And so there's so many ways. I think of, as I was looking for business, I found ways that I could develop my business. One of them was through networking. And I started doing networking on a consistent basis. When you go out doing networking, things don't happen just overnight like that. But if you do it consistently, then you meet people, you get the opportunity to develop relationships. And as you develop relationships, those become actually good, solid, meaningful, long-lasting relationships. Some of my best relationships, hey, listen, just pause. We talked about it before, but Neal and I met at a networking event.
Let's go. I was curious if you were going to bring it up, sir.
Yeah. And so that's where I think consistency shows up. I didn't know I was going to meet Neal, but I was another networking event that I was giving myself the opportunity to connect with people, maybe strengthen relationships that I already had, and then make new connections and relationships. So the point is that in my business, when I look back in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for doing some things along the way on a consistent basis.
And so for me, there's a mixed feeling. So when I think of the compound effect, I think of reading, right? And so people say, don't have time. Neal, I don't have time to read. Robin, you and Neal are always talking about these books, and Dr. Maxwell has written over 90 books, and you all have read all of them. And where do you find the time to read all of these books and try to get better? And then for us as husbands, as fathers, as owners and leaders and friends, we realize that I'm not going to sit down and read a book in a day, but I might do something like just read 10 pages today. And then I read 10 pages tomorrow. And then next thing you know, we look up, and over a year, that's going to be 3,600 pages that we could have read, right? Or 12 books. And now not only have we read the books, we're going to be implementing what we have learned. And then we look up, since time had to pass anyway, Robin Lewis, we look up, and after 5 years, after 8 years, we say, you know what? We've read some books. We've taken some notes. We've learned a few things, not because of this huge, massive initiative, but just a commitment to consistently read 5 or 10 pages, to consistently network, to get outside of our comfort zones a little bit each day. Then we look up and say, man, we're pretty good at what we do. We are not only pretty good, but because of the exposure that we've had consistently, and the compound effect is that we're tied to a pretty great organization and to leaders. And the rooms that we're in are rooms that we would not be in had we not consistently done those small actions or activities.
Right answer. Exactly. I mean, so it's, I think a lot of times we want to get immediate results, but that's not the way it works.
Robin, if you ask me, Neal, what do you want? Do you want the in due season or today? I'm choosing today, sir.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it's so powerful what we're sharing with our listeners today, that the power is in the small steps. I had just recently, I got to the end of the day and I hadn't read from a book that I wanted to read from, and I was tired. But you know what I did, Neal? I literally said, okay, just read one page today. And I literally read one page. And if I can be honest with you, I'm not sure that I really took in a lot with that one page that day, but I just wanted to stick to the habit of reading. And so that's the point that I'm making to our listeners, that it's not perfection. It's just the taking the step. It's doing the small step. I heard somebody say the other day, Neal, and then we can move on, but they were talking about, sometimes you get away from going to the gym. You might be somebody who is a gym person. And when you get away from the gym, sometimes the hardest thing is to get back into it. And what they said is, all I want you to do today is just dress up. Don't even leave your house. You just dress up like you're going to the gym. And then tomorrow, what I want you to do is I want you to dress up, and then I want you to drive to the gym. Don't go inside, but just dress up and drive. And so the point that he was making is that the way to get back into it is just taking those small steps. So that's what we're talking about for our listeners. That's what
So
produces
I heard the
real.
same example. And and
Yeah.
and so so for me, that's important because then it lets me know that I don't have to go back in and start trying to lift all of this weight, that it might be small incremental steps,
Yeah.
as you
Right
just
on.
mentioned. And
Right
I
on.
think that us knowing that we're not by ourselves in that is a great reminder, and it will encourage us to be more consistent. So
Yes.
we talk about working out, exercise, gym, and I think that leads us to a great place where many of us get confused about, and that's consistency versus motivation, Robin. So we've got consistency on one side, and we've got motivation on the other side. And a lot of times people think they need to feel motivated every single day to take action. They need to be motivated to read, to go to the gym, but that's not how consistency works. So I want to know, as someone who just talked about coming home after a long day and not being motivated to read the book, but then understanding the power of consistency in reading daily. Would you talk about the relationship between motivation and consistency? I think this
Yes.
would be valuable and powerful for our audience.
I think motivation is amazing, right? So we do want to have reasons. I think the why behind whatever it is that we're doing, if it is, so we talk about, we're talking a little bit today about exercise, and so this is taking care of ourselves health wise. The motivation for that is because we can live longer. The motivation for that is because we can spend more time and have the energy to spend time with our grandkids. The motivation for that is, we can look good and feel good in our clothes and so on. So motivation is good. But here's the point, which I think Neal is touching on. Neal, I'm sure you agree with this. Motivation is unreliable because there are times when we're not going to feel motivated. And that's okay, because consistency isn't about feeling motivated. Consistency is about doing the thing even when you don't feel like it. I'm oftentimes reminded of the little jingle that we used to sing when we were growing up. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, right? If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. And the point there is that, you don't need to have the emotion. You don't need to have the motivation to actually take action. A lot of times taking action is what it's really all about, even when you don't feel it. And a lot of times as you take the action, have you ever done it, folks, done something that you didn't really want to do, but then as you're doing it, or when you're done doing it, you're motivated because you did it, right? I think of the last thing that I'll say about this is I think of Zig Ziglar. He used to say he was a runner. If you're, the great motivator and educator, Mr. Zig Ziglar. I think, personal development. If you're into personal development, you've heard of Zig Ziglar. But he used to say that, how do you get up? He used to get up early morning, right? 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I think like you do, Neal, to go do his running. He used to run. And he said, you know how you get up? You know what I do? Because he's talking about motivation. There are times I don't feel motivated to get up out of my bed at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to go run. But you know how I get up? And he set people up. I remember, I can see it now, him holding me. Yes, I want to know. And like I'm doing with our listeners now, actually, you want to know how to get motivated and how Zig Ziglar got motivated to get up at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning to go running. You know what he said, Neal? He says, I take my 2 feet and I put them on the edge of the bed and I stand up. So the point that he was making is that what he does is he took the action, even when he didn't feel like it. He just swung his feet over on the side of the bed, let them touch the ground, and he stood up. And we can't rely on motivation. We just have to do it, and then do it until it becomes a part of our routine.
So, Robin, that's a powerful point, and so I think of it as this, like motivation is a spark, but consistency is the fire. It keeps the momentum going after the initial excitement fades. And so I'm always thinking of New Year's resolutions, right? How that's the spark, but we don't have the fire to keep us going. And I think that
I
once
like
people
that.
realize that, hey, come on. So
I like
every now and then I have a moment. And here's what I think. I think that once people realize that consistency doesn't rely on motivation, they start to see the results, right? And so here's the thing: the more you show up, the easier it gets. It doesn't get easy, but it gets easier. And I think part of that is because we have proven to ourselves that we can at least show up. And a
Yeah.
lot of times that is the challenge.
And sometimes we don't see it until looking back. But I think a lot of people underestimate how small actions done over time can lead to, big results. When you're consistent, when I'm consistent in an area, I'm building momentum that helps me to push through, even on days when I don't feel motivated.
But you just mentioned we don't see it until we look back. And if we aren't careful, we'll look back and see all of our failures, mistakes, missteps, instead of seeing how far we've come over that journey.
Yeah.
And so I just want us to be reminded of that, is that if you're here listening to this episode of the Big Life Podcast, that you have already come a ways on your journey. And so when you look back, say there are areas where you have been positively consistent, remember those. But now we're going to dive into a little science. So fortunately for me, I did love science in school. It was one of my favorite subjects. And so I love the way the mind works, the way the brain works. So the brain actually works with us when we practice consistency. So we are giving ourselves a benefit because repetition forms neural pathways. And I just mentioned the word easier. So once we have those neural pathways because of repetition, it makes it easier and easier to perform the habit without much thought. And that's when it comes to our identity that we mentioned earlier in this episode. So Robin, what's your take on consistency and shaping our brain?
Yeah, it's about the conscious or the subconscious mind. I think about driving. I always use the analogy when we learn to drive. When we learn to drive, it's awkward. If we can just stop, I'm going to put myself in that frame of mind of when I learn to drive. You're looking in the rear view mirror consistently, checking the side view mirror. You're making sure you're holding the steering wheel with both hands. You're making sure that you're pressing the right, gas or brake, and you're just making sure that everything is good, and you're thinking about it. You're very focused on what you're doing. If I think about my driving now, I don't even give those things much thought. I just do them. Right? Some of you might be driving as you're listening to us, and just think about that. You're driving now without giving driving much thought. And that's the subconscious mind. So that's how I relate to it. I wasn't the science guy, but I can understand that. In other words, the point is that when you're consistent with something, it gets to a place where it just becomes a part of who you are, because your subconscious mind takes over. You've now created a habit that you can do that's just a part of you. It's that we talked about early on: brushing your teeth, combing your hair, driving your car. It becomes a part of who you are. There's a part of our mind that once we train it, it just operates. And by the way, I think that can be good and that can be bad. And so we've created good habits and we've also created bad habits. And so understand that, if we have bad habits, that it's going to take consistently trying to change that. It's not just going to happen just like that. I think that ties into what you were saying too, when it comes to New Year's resolutions and so on, right? If we're, there's a saying, what's that saying, Neal, that if we come to the problem with the same thinking that we had that created it, we're not going to be able to actually solve it. And so keep that in mind when we terms of habits too, because we've created some good habits and we've also created some bad habits, and we can overcome them through consistency. But we're going to have to make them become a part of who we are.
Robin, I am going to pivot here for a moment before we continue, because this is a personal question. You talked about driving. Where did you learn how to drive?
That's a great question. It's funny. I learned in Jamaica, first of all. I grew up in Jamaica.
So stop right there, because we're talking about the habits of driving, right?
Yeah.
So you driving in Jamaica versus you driving here, and then if you have to go back to Jamaica and drive, even though you know how to drive, right?
Yeah.
The practice and that consistency piece, there are some differences I'm
Major.
thinking about
Yeah.
this too. Would you just talk about it? Even though we know how to do this thing, if we aren't consistent in doing this thing in the same
Certain way.
environment, that can
Yes.
cause a little bit of discomfort as well. Go ahead, Robin.
That's such a good point. As I was talking about good or bad, this is neither good or bad, but it makes the same point that I was driving in Jamaica last year. And Neil, so we drive on the left side of the road in Jamaica versus on the right side of the road where I live in Florida. And the drivers drive a whole lot different, right? So the people that are on the road with you, their practice, how they drive, some of them don't pay attention to the traffic light. Some of them don't pay attention to the stop sign. Some of them don't pay attention to the lanes that you have and so on. The direction that you're going in that lane. And so yeah, you know what happened? I literally, this happened to me. So I had to really be conscious about my driving. And I was actually being intimidated by those around me. And I felt like I didn't know how to drive again, Neil. It's such a good point. And I had to stop
Hey,
and remind myself, Rob, you know how to drive. Don't let these people intimidate you. You just think about what you're doing. There's few differences here, but you know what you're doing. And I had to kind of, get to that point, Neil. It's such a good example.
So the moment you started talking about driving, my mind went back, and I remember you coming back from Jamaica telling me that story. You said,
Yeah.
Neil, let me tell you, it was different. It was like, here's this thing I do every day. I learned how to drive in Jamaica. I was good at it. I drive every day here. I'm good at it. But because I have not consistently recently driven in Jamaica, I had to go back and reacclimate. I had to get my mind and those neural pathways, right? That repetition, things were a little different. And those real life examples, as something as simple as driving in your home country. But then you mentioned something that you had to talk to yourself and say, hey, I'm capable. I know how to do this thing. And so many times when we look at consistency or the lack of consistency, we would think our lack of consistent and repeated behavior or the lack of the right habits, we will disqualify ourselves from even believing that we can do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And so this is how it plays out in real life, Robin. So consistency shows up in every area, whether it's driving, right? Whether it's health that we've talked about, career, relationships, but everywhere. And so we just talked about something in personal life where it could be where like something as simple as driving. For me, I'm going to share an example. In my personal life, I see consistency in the time that I spend with my wife or my son. Right. If I'm consistent in building, in investing time there, and opening my ears and shutting my mouth and asking the right questions and not telling them what they should do or how they should think, I found that consistency, now they know that Neil is a safe space, that husband and dad is a safe space to share. And as a result, our relational equity has compounded, that now they can trust me with the hard conversations, with those uncomfortable times when things need to be shared. And so I'm just curious if you've had any experience where it shows up for you personally or professionally when it comes to consistency.
I think definitely in my personal life, I think about my health. I look back at some pictures that I have just not that many years ago, and I had on a lot more weight, and I've had to build the habit of getting exercise on a regular basis, eating better, prioritizing my well-being, drinking more water and not soda, doing away
Right there,
with.
Robin. Robin, how, whenever someone talks about weight or health, let's just say health, we're not talking about weight. The first thing they say is drink more water. Something as small as drinking more water should not have the impact that it does in my mind, right? In my head, I'm
Yes,
like, you're
yes,
telling me
I
if I
agree.
drink water, water solves a lot of issues, Robin.
Yeah, you're right. I don't get it either. Like sometimes, like, they tell us that what our body is made up of, what, 70% of it is water?
Something like
Some big,
that.
some high number. I might even be getting it wrong. I'm sorry for our science majors out there, but I've been told that our body is, because when I look at myself, when I look at other people, I'm not seeing water. So I'm like you, man. But yeah, drinking water kind of helps you curb your appetite. Drinking water helps you to, restore your muscles and all this stuff, and all the benefits that water does. I don't want to talk like I know what I'm talking about, but I've heard some of them. But yeah, I've just been told that, sugar is not good for you, so stay away from the soda. My wife has always said, don't drink the juices either, because they're just full of sugar as well. And
I just
so,
found that out a couple of weeks ago. They were like,
yeah,
I'm like, man, I'm drinking my juice. And they're like, nah, it's
yeah,
concentrated sugar. And I was like,
yeah. So those kind of
don't,
things have definitely showed up in my personal life, man. Things like, if I most of the time I'm not taking the elevator anymore. I'm taking the stairs. Just taking that little time to, I've learned that just walking. So if I don't get to play pickleball, if I don't get to go, to the gym or something like that, which gym is not really a part of my life right now, but I want to try and get at least 30 minutes of exercise on a daily basis, and those kind of things have added up over time to help me to be a much healthier now than I was several years ago.
same here. And I mentioned my love-hate relationship with dark soda. And I'm talking about like Dr. Pepper and root beer, that really bad stuff, right? The stuff that I could just inject straight into my veins and be okay. I would drink a 2 liter like it was a 20-ounce, Robin. That's how bad it was. But not only personally, but then we start looking at professionally. And I know that for us, being in sales, some type of sales, small things, right? Making sure that our desk is set up for the next day, making sure that we do that unsexy prospecting or follow up, making sure we ask our customers or clients for referrals, showing up for meetings on time. All of that, when we're consistent, it builds trust. And I know you love that word trust, and that trust leads to stronger relationships, which lead to a better brand and the such. So there's so much that small, seemingly insignificant actions done consistently over time that they lead up to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's, it's one of those things that when we look back is when we really see it. I think from a business standpoint, I have a reputation that I have created, and that's of somebody who cares, somebody who does the right thing. And that didn't happen over time. That happened over years of consistent effort, consistently showing up in that manner. And yeah, so that it goes a long way. Everything doesn't happen at once, but it's about focusing on that thing that you want to be about and doing that on a regular basis consistently, and over time, yeah, that pays off.
So as we get ready to close, we can't leave without answering the question. So how do we actually build consistency, right? So you all have told us the importance of it, that we've shared with them why we should and the impact and the positive outcomes. But how does it look? How does it show up in our life? But first off, here's what Robin and I will just continue to reemphasize: is to start small, right? If we want to do anything, let's just start with the small step. And if it's health, like maybe it's, as Robin said, take the stairs, or something my wife and I that we do for health. We always park in the back of the parking lot and we just walk. Right. And so one is always less crowded in the back of a parking lot. Our cars don't get dinged. But instead of us saying we're going to go to the gym, and I'm like you, Robin, the gym is not part of my life right now. I tell everyone that I'm working on a swimmer's body. So I'm getting lean. Whether that's the truth or not, that's my reasoning. But I'm not going to jump into an hour-long workout. I'm going to say, let me take the stairs. Let me drink more water. And so let's focus on those small habits. What are your thoughts on that, Robin?
I agree 100%. That's so our listeners, if there's an area of your life that you want to develop a habit in, there's somewhere that maybe you feel stuck, and that if you can get this done, if you can take this step, maybe it's reading. Neil and I suggest that leaders are readers, and that we should get in the habit of reading every day. If you want to make reading a habit, what I would encourage you to do is just start reading one page. I remember somebody, it was in my Amway days. He literally tore a page out of the book every day. He tore a page and he just made sure to take that page with him so he could read that page whenever he got the opportunity. And so what I'm encouraging you to do is just what Neal said. Start small. If it's reading, read a page a day. If you want to write something, write a few minutes every day. One habit that's not going to overwhelm you, something that you know you can do. So I would say emphasize, start small. And then when you get that, when that small thing becomes a habit and it becomes easy, then you can start to increase and you can start to build up from there. So maybe it might not just be one page. Now it's 2 or 3 or more, right? So you start small and then build up from there.
And so with that, that's going to lead to my next piece is start small, but also track your progress, right? So maybe your tracking isn't going to be how many pages you've ripped out of a book, but it might be checking your calendar or using an app or something. I know in the Bible app, it's telling me how many days I have in a row I've read, or my devos that I have done. My language learning apps is telling me, okay, you've done this amount of time. So track, because the saying goes, what you don't measure, you can't improve. And so if we really do want to improve our consistency, if we really do want to reap the rewards, we want to measure those things so that we can get better.
And I would say, don't forget to celebrate the small wins also. I think there's encouragement, there's motivation, there's momentum that builds as we do that. And I think it's very good. It's a good thing. Sometimes I've missed it in my life, but celebrate whatever that might mean. It might mean get an ice cream cone, or, allowing yourself to have a little treat, or whatever that might be. But celebrate the small wins as well. So you're recognizing the progress that you're making.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to the Big Life podcast here, we know that you are an achiever. We know that you probably don't give yourself the grace that you give to others, that maybe in our pursuit of the thing, we are always looking forward. We never take a quick moment to look in that rearview and say, yes, we've done some pretty good stuff, some pretty cool things, and we have come a way. So to wrap up today's episode of the Big Life Podcast, Robin and I want you to remember that consistency is the key to success. So it doesn't matter in what area of your life that is, whether it's business, health, relationships, that small daily actions compound over time, and the result is going to be something massive. It's going to be a beautiful masterpiece. So as Robin and I have encouraged you to do, start small, stay consistent, and then not only watch how things transform, we are going to encourage you to expect things to transform, because the law is the law. And if we will stay consistent over time to the right things, we are going to see some great results.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more as we close out here. Things are not going to happen overnight. It's about showing up every day and making those small steps, taking that small effort every day. And then we'll be amazed, actually, how far that will go as a result.
So, Robin, I am going to pivot here. Usually, I'm the one that's issuing challenges to our audience, but I am not going to issue the challenge because I don't want them to think of me as the bad guy, the one that's always giving them something to do. So, I'm going to ask you, what would you encourage our listeners or viewers to do today in terms of consistency?
I think one good takeaway from this, listen, if you're this far in the episode, what I want you to do is to pick one area of your life that you want to build consistency. Pick one area, just one, and I want you to start with a small action that you can commit to every day. And let's start building those habits together.
And so, as Robin says, build those habits together. Here's how we're going to do that. You are going to let us know in the comments or anywhere you're watching or listening to this podcast. Let us know what habit you are committing to. Let us know how Robin and I, how we can be of assistance to you in building and creating those habits and being consistent in those areas. And then we are going to ask you to do what we have been consistent in doing. Make sure you share this podcast. Make sure you comment, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to whatever platform that you're listening to us on, because we believe that as you consistently show up, as you take in each and every one of the episodes here of the Big Life Podcast, you get better, we get better, the world gets better. We leave our family here, Robin. Anything you have to share with them?
No, sir. And just to say thanks for tuning in. We love you. We hope we've added value to you and love to hear from you. So please reiterate, share your comments and your thoughts. If you have any questions, if you have any topics you want us to talk about, share that as well.
Robin and I are absolutely honored that you have hung out with us for this episode of the Big Life Podcast. We want to remind you that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time you see us or we see you, don't be average, and we are right there with you. Peace.
Right on. Peace.